It started with the kind of chaos you only see in cheap comedies or bad luck nightmares. My flight was canceled. The terminal lights flickered with exhaustion, and somewhere between the announcements of delays and angry passengers demanding answers, I realized I was utterly, devastatingly stuck. And then he walked in like the storm had spat him out just to ruin me further. He wasn't supposed to matter. Just another stranded passenger. Another shadow in the restless blur of people dragging suitcases and broken dreams across the polished airport floor. But the moment his hazel eyes caught mine, sharp and wary yet tired in a way that felt familiar, something twisted inside my chest. It was inconvenient, unnecessary, dangerous. The snow outside whipped against the massive glass panels, a furious white curtain that swallowed the runway whole. Flights grounded until morning. Hotels nearby overbooked. The loudspeaker repeated the same apologies until the words lost all meaning. People scattered with phones pressed to ears, scrambling for solutions. But me, I just sat there, with my overstuffed duffel bag and a bitter taste in my mouth, silently calculating how many hours of this I could survive without throwing my sanity into the blizzard. That's when he dropped into the seat across from me. No introduction, no apology, just his presence, heavy like gravity. "You planning to camp here all night?" he asked, his voice low, carrying the kind of sarcasm you'd expect from someone who had long stopped expecting good things. I looked up, ready to snap at a stranger for daring to invade my bubble. But the words snagged in my throat. His face-sharp lines softened by fatigue, stubble shadowing his jaw, dark hair falling over his forehead was unfair. Not beautiful in the polished way you'd see on screens, but raw, flawed, magnetic. "Do I have a choice?" I shot back, matching his tone, because God forbid he saw how he already unsettled me. He smirked, like he'd found a crack in me already. "Guess not." We didn't exchange names right away. Didn't need to. The storm outside had trapped us both in a limbo where small talk felt pointless, where two strangers could share silence louder than conversation. Hours blurred. He dozed against the cold window, and I caught myself watching the way his chest rose and fell, steady despite the chaos outside. When his head tilted dangerously close to slipping off the ledge, I almost reached out to steady him. Almost. By the time the airport staff announced the inevitable, that nothing would move until tomorrow, that everyone should make themselves comfortable, the crowd had thinned. Families bundled together. Couples clung to each other. Solo travelers like me drifted between exhaustion and resentment. That's when his voice broke the silence again. "Look, my apartment's 15 minutes from here. Spare couch. Heat. Hot shower. You in?" It should have sounded like a bad idea. My mother's voice, buried in the back of my head, screamed about serial killers and cautionary tales. But my body, my frozen toes, my drained heart, they all said yes before my mind could intervene. And so, I followed a stranger out into the blizzard. The city streets were unrecognizable, buried under layers of white. Snowflakes slapped against my face like tiny, cold punishments. He walked slightly ahead, shoulders squared, cutting through the storm with a certainty that made me feel like I wouldn't make it without him. His hand brushed mine once by accident, surely, but it left a spark so sharp it hurt. When we finally stumbled into his apartment, the warmth nearly knocked me over. The smell of cedar and coffee lingered in the air, faint but grounding. He flicked on the lights, revealing a space that was lived in. Cluttered yet comforting books stacked unevenly, a record player in the corner, mismatched mugs on the counter. "Shoes off," he muttered, tossing his jacket onto a chair. "You'll ruin the floor." I obeyed without complaint, too numb to argue. My socks were soaked, my bones aching. He handed me a towel and gestured toward the bathroom. "Hot water still works. Go." I should have questioned it. Should have asked why he cared enough to let me in, why he was willing to risk his safety for someone he'd met hours ago. But I didn't. I just let the steam wash over me until my skin burned pink, until the storm outside became something distant, muffled. When I emerged, wrapped in the borrowed hoodie he'd left at the door, he was on the couch, feet up, scrolling through his phone like none of this was strange. He glanced up once, eyes flicking over me in a way that made heat crawl up my neck, then looked away. "Hungry?" he asked. I nodded. He ordered pizza, and we ate it cross-legged on the living room floor, the silence between us less heavy now, more like a thread pulling us closer. At one point, cheese stretched between his slice and mine, and when he laughed low, unguarded, it felt like the first warm thing I'd heard in years. I should have been more careful. I should have remembered that strangers are dangerous. But when his shoulder brushed mine, when his knee pressed lightly against my leg and didn't move, I didn't pull away. The storm outside howled on, but inside, something quieter, hungrier, was beginning to take shape. The storm kept raging, hammering at the windows like it had a vendetta, but inside his apartment, the air was warm enough to make me forget the world outside for a moment. The pizza box sat open between us, half empty, our knees brushing occasionally like it was no big deal, though every touch sent a jolt through me. I hadn't expected to feel anything here. Not comfort, not safety, and definitely not the strange fluttering heat that was steadily wrapping itself around my chest like a blanket I couldn't push off. He leaned back, balancing his slice in one hand. "So, mystery man," he said, smirking like he was testing me. "Are you always this quiet, or are you just planning your escape route?" I swallowed a bite, too big, too dry. Maybe I'm trying to figure out why I followed a stranger home through a snowstorm. Pretty reckless of me, don't you think? His smirk widened, but his eyes softened. "Maybe, or maybe you just trusted your instincts." He paused, as though weighing whether to add more. "People don't do that much anymore." Something in the way he said "ethalf bitter," half wistful, made me ache a little. I wanted to ask what he meant, but I stopped myself. The weight in his voice wasn't an invitation. Not yet. Instead, I asked, "Do you always invite stranded travelers into your apartment? Or am I just lucky?" That earned me a short laugh, rough and genuine. "First time. Don't flatter yourself. You just looked pathetic enough that I figured you'd freeze to death if I didn't." "Wow," I deadpanned. "So chivalrous." He raised his glass of soda in mock salute. "That's me. Modern-day knight in sweatpants." We ate in silence after that, but it was a softer silence, the kind that didn't demand to be broken. My eyes kept flicking to him, the way his hair curled damply at his temples, the way his hands were strong but restless, drumming lightly against his thigh like he couldn't sit still. There was a loneliness about him that mirrored my own, though neither of us had said it out loud. When the pizza was gone, he tossed the box aside and stood, stretching lazily. "You can take the bed. I'll crash on the couch." That startled me. "What? No, I can't kick you out of your own room." His eyes met mine, sharp but not unkind. "You've been sitting in an airport all day. You need it more than I do." I shook my head firmly. "Not happening. I'll take the couch." He smirked again, like he liked that I pushed back. "Fine. Then we'll both take the couch." I blinked. "That's not really how couches work." "Sure it is," he said, already grabbing a blanket from the hall closet. "It's called making do." I opened my mouth to argue again, but stopped when he tossed the blanket at me and flopped down on one end of the couch. He patted the other end with an exaggerated flourish. "You coming or what?" I hesitated, every nerve in my body screaming at me about how bad of an idea this was. But the couch was wide enough, the storm outside was relentless, and for reasons I couldn't quite explain, I trusted him. Against all logic, I trusted him. So I lay down on the other end, facing him. The blanket stretched just barely to cover us both. His sock-clad foot brushed mine once, deliberately or not, and I froze. He didn't move it. "See?" he murmured, his voice low, almost swallowed by the hum of the heater. "Making do." My chest ached with something I didn't want to name. "You're impossible." He chuckled, the sound softer this time, less guarded. "Get some sleep, mystery man." But sleep didn't come easily. Not with the storm howling outside, not with his warmth so close, not with the steady rhythm of his breathing anchoring me in a way I hadn't realized I needed. And somewhere between one blink and the next, exhaustion finally pulled me under. When I woke, The light streaming through the window was muted, filtered through the endless white still swallowing the city. The storm hadn't stopped, but what stopped me was the weight draped across my waist. His arm. He was still asleep, face relaxed in a way I hadn't seen before. Without the sharp edges of his smirk or the guarded tension in his jaw, he looked younger, softer, human in a way that made my throat tighten. I should have moved, should have peeled his arm away, put distance between us before it meant anything. But I didn't. I let myself feel the steady heat of him pressed close, the faint brush of his breath against my shoulder, the way my heart was pounding like it wanted to break free. And in that stolen, fragile moment, I let myself imagine that this wasn't temporary, that we weren't just two strangers thrown together by chance, that maybe, just maybe, I'd stumbled into something I hadn't even known I was missing. His eyes opened slowly, hazel flecked with sleep. They landed on me, and for a heartbeat he didn't move his arm. He didn't even look surprised. "Morning," he said, voice rough with sleep. I swallowed hard. "Morning." The silence stretched, filled with everything we weren't saying. Then, finally, he pulled his arm back, sitting up with a groan and rubbing at his face. "Storm's still going. We're not going anywhere today." It should have felt like bad news. Another day trapped, another day off schedule. But instead, a guilty thrill ran through me. Another day here, another day with him. I sat up, pulling the blanket tighter around me. "Guess we're stuck with each other." He glanced at me, something unreadable flickering in his gaze. Then he nodded once. "Guess we are." The hours blurred again. He made coffee strong enough to burn the back of my throat, and we drank it in mismatched mugs by the window, watching the snow swallow the world. He put on a record, some old jazz that filled the silence without crowding it. We traded pieces of ourselves carefully, like cards in a game neither of us wanted to lose. His name was Ethan. He'd lived in the city for years but never quite belonged. He liked photography, though he hadn't picked up a camera in months. He hated olives but loved black coffee. I told him my name, that I'd grown up in a small town where the biggest excitement was Friday night football, that I'd come to New York chasing something I couldn't quite define, that my relationship with my family was complicated in ways I didn't want to unravel just yet. He didn't press. He just nodded like he understood the things I wasn't saying. By late afternoon, we were back on the couch, a movie playing quietly on the TV. He sat close enough that our shoulders touched, and neither of us moved away. The storm outside had lost some of its fury, but the city was still buried, unreachable. "Funny," he murmured suddenly. I turned to look at him. "What is?" "That it took a blizzard to make me actually talk to someone like this." He glanced at me, half-smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe fate's got a weird sense of humor." My chest tightened. "Yeah, maybe." And for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe it. The second day together felt different. The storm still roared outside, but between Ethan and me, there was a fragile cowman unspoken agreement to ignore the world and stay in the strange bubble we'd built. Yet under that calm, something restless brewed. I caught myself watching him too much. The way his hair stuck up when he raked his fingers through it, the way his laughter slipped out in short bursts, the way he leaned against the counter while making coffee like he belonged in every corner of his apartment. He wasn't mine. He wasn't even supposed to matter. But each second was pulling me deeper, making me forget this was temporary. We spent the morning with a puzzle he dug out from a dusty box under his coffee table. "Don't laugh," he warned as he dumped the pieces onto the rug. "It's the only thing I could find." It was some outdated image of a lighthouse against a pink sunset, and half the pieces were bent or frayed. But we sat there anyway, shoulder to shoulder, fitting jagged cardboard edges together like it meant something. After an hour, I groaned, rubbing my temple. "This is torture." Ethan smirked. "You're just bad at it." "Excuse me? I've literally found more pieces than you." He raised an eyebrow, lips twitching like he was holding back laughter. "You want to keep score?" And suddenly, we were competing, snatching pieces from the pile, accusing each other of cheating, laughing until my stomach hurt. For a moment, it was easy to forget the storm, the airport, the fact that in a few days we'd be strangers again. But then it happened. As we both reached for the same piece, our fingers collided. Neither of us pulled back. His skin was warm against mine, electric in a way that made the air tighten. I looked up, and he was already watching me, his hazel eyes darker, searching. The laughter faded. The puzzle lay forgotten between us. I should have moved, should have cracked a joke, broken the tension. But my body betrayed me, leaning in ever so slightly, my breath catching when his hand didn't move away. For a heartbeat, it felt inevitable, like the storm had trapped us here just for this. And then Ethan pulled back. He cleared his throat, standing abruptly. "I'll get us more coffee." The warmth drained out of the room. I didn't know what hurt more, the sudden distance or the fact that I'd wanted something I had no right to want. For the rest of the afternoon, Ethan kept himself busy. Washing dishes that didn't need washing, scrolling aimlessly through his phone, even reorganizing the stack of books by the window. He didn't look at me, not the way he had before. By evening, the silence between us was suffocating. I finally broke it. Did I do something wrong? His back was to me as he rinsed a mug in the sink. His shoulders tensed, but he didn't turn around. "No, then what is this?" My voice cracked more than I wanted it to. "You've been avoiding me all day." Finally, he turned. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were heavy with something: fear, regret, maybe both. "This is nothing," he said flatly. "We're just two people stuck in a snowstorm. That's all." The words stung, sharp and cold, more brutal than the blizzard outside. I swallowed hard. If that's all it is, then why did it feel like something more? His jaw tightened. He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed his jacket and muttered, "I need some air," before disappearing out the door into the swirling snow. I sat there alone, the apartment suddenly too big, too empty. My chest ached with something I couldn't name, something I wasn't sure I wanted to. I should have left it at that. Should have respected his walls. Should have packed up my bag and waited for the storm to pass so I could vanish from his life as easily as I'd entered it. But I couldn't, because somewhere between the airport chaos and this tiny, cluttered apartment, Ethan had stopped being a stranger. And whether he admitted it or not, I wasn't nothing to him either. He came back an hour later, dusted with snow, his hair damp, his cheeks raw from the cold. He didn't speak at first, just shut the door and leaned against it, breathing hard like he'd been running. When his eyes finally met mine, there was no hiding in them. They burned with everything he'd tried to bury. "You don't get it," he said quietly, voice rough. "I can't do this." My throat tightened. "Do what?" "This." He gestured vaguely between us, like the word itself was too dangerous. "Getting close, letting anyone in. It never ends well." I stood slowly, my pulse racing. "You think I don't know that? You think I haven't been there too?" He shook his head, looking away. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've done. Trust me, you don't want to." The pain in his voice sliced through me, but so did the raw honesty of it. Whatever he was carrying, it was heavy, and it was eating him alive. I stepped closer, my voice low but steady. "Then let me know you." His breath caught, his shoulders trembling as if he was holding back more than words. For a long moment he didn't move, and then, like something inside him finally snapped, Ethan closed the distance. His lips crashed against mine, desperate, unsteady, like he hated himself for needing it but couldn't stop. The world outside ceased to exist. The storm, the airport, the uncertainty of tomorrow, it all dissolved under the weight of him, of us. I kissed him back with everything I'd been holding in, with the longing that had been clawing at me since the moment I met him. His hands gripped my shoulders like he was afraid I'd disappear, and I clung to him just as fiercely. When we finally broke apart, breathless, his forehead pressed to mine, his voice was a whisper. "This is a mistake." But the way his hands stayed on me, trembling, betrayed the truth. "No," I whispered back. "This feels like the first thing that isn't." The night unraveled in a haze of whispered confessions and quiet touches, tentative but urgent. like we were both afraid the storm would end too soon and take this away with it. We didn't label it, didn't try to make sense of what it meant. We just let ourselves be, two strangers bound by something stronger than chance, holding onto each other against the cold. And for the first time in years, I felt warm. The storm finally broke on the fourth morning. I woke to a pale light spilling across the apartment floor, softer than it had been in days. Outside, the city was buried under layers of white, glittering in the sun like the storm had been nothing more than a cruel joke. But inside, the air was heavy, because the storm breaking meant flights would resume. It meant this fragile world Ethan and I had built, the blanket forts of silence, the late-night confessions, the stolen kisses, was running out of time. He was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, shoulders tight. He hadn't slept much. Neither of us had. "Flights are back," he said without turning. I sat up, heart thudding. "So, that's it then?" He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "That's what happens when the world starts moving again. The bubble pops." I swung my legs over the side of the couch, anger rising to cover the ache. "So what? We just pretend this never happened?" He turned then, eyes sharp, haunted. "What do you want me to say? That I'm ready for something I know I'll screw up? That you should stay here and play house with me while I drag you into the mess that is my life?" His voice cracked on the last word, and I realized with a gut-deep certainty, this wasn't about me. This was about whatever he was running from long before the storm hit. I stood, closing the space between us. "Ethan, I don't care about your mess. I don't care what came before. I just care about you. Isn't that enough?" His eyes flickered, torn. His hands clenched at his sides like he wanted to reach for me but couldn't trust himself to. "People who care about me don't stay. They never do." The words hit me harder than I expected, because they weren't just fear, they were history. Wounds carved deep. I reached up, cupping his jaw with trembling fingers. "Then let me be the first who does." For a long moment, he just stared at me, searching, battling something inside himself. Then, slowly, like surrender, his forehead dropped against mine. "I don't deserve that," he whispered. "Maybe not," I whispered back. "But you still have it." The hours that followed were a blur of choices neither of us wanted to face. My phone buzzed with flight updates. The airport was open. People were moving on. But every time I looked at Ethan, the thought of leaving felt unbearable. We sat on the couch, silence stretching between us like a question mark. Finally, he spoke, voice barely audible. "If you walk out that door, I won't stop you. I won't ask you to stay. But if you do, I don't know if I'll survive it." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said. I took his hand, threading my fingers through his. "Then don't let me walk out." His breath hitched. "You'd give up your flight? Your plans? Everything?" I squeezed his hand tighter. "Ethan, everything I thought I needed doesn't compare to what I found here." For the first time, truly, he smiled. Not the crooked smirk, not the guarded half-smile. A real one, soft and raw, like the sun breaking through clouds. The days that followed were not perfect. We argued about little things, about big things. Ethan's walls didn't crumble overnight, and I stumbled more than once against the sharp edges of his past. There were nights he shut down, nights I wondered if I'd made a mistake. But there were also mornings when he made coffee just the way I liked it, without asking. Afternoons when he pulled out his old camera and let me be the one to coax him back into the world through its lens. Evenings when the city glittered outside and his arm found its way around me like it had always belonged there. Love, I realized, wasn't about perfect storms or perfect people. It was about choosing each other again and again, even when the world offered easier paths. Months later, I'd almost forgotten the airport chaos, the cold plastic chairs, the endless announcements of canceled flights. But I hadn't forgotten the way Ethan had looked at me that night on the couch, torn and terrified, yet still choosing to stay close. We weren't strangers anymore. We weren't even just two men caught in a storm. We were something else entirely. And as I lay in his bed one evening, the city lights spilling across the ceiling, Ethan's fingers tracing lazy circles on my arm, I thought back to that first moment two strangers colliding in the unlikeliest place. I guess the storm did one good thing, I murmured. Ethan chuckled softly, pressing a kiss to my temple. Yeah, I whispered. It brought me you. His arms tightened around me, his voice low but certain. Then maybe it wasn't a storm at all. Maybe it was just fate. And for the first time, I believed him. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.